What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Go Birds podcast, an emergency, historic edition of the Go Birds podcast. History could only be held back so long, Brandon. I'm, of course, here with Brandon Lee Gowton of Bleeding Green Nation. No James today on this historic day. Sad not to have him. But in case you've been living under a rock, I will start with the big news from Wednesday's practice. Jalen Hurts did it. He didn't do it on Tuesday. Unfortunately, he had 11 attempts there. But the second pass of camp today, incompletion to Johnny Wilson, doesn't matter that it was incomplete. It brought him to 158 throws in training camp without an interception, a new record for Eagles training camp. Brandon, how are you doing, and what did it feel like to be on the sideline for this?
It was, as you said, when you were on WIP today, awesome. I think it was really a historical moment. I appreciated the effort by you to tweet the tying pass attempt first,
Yes.
And then obviously the very pre-scripted celebration tweet with the graphic of Jalen Hurts doing the Will Chamberlain impression.
Yes.
There. That was good work.
Thank you. Yes, it was funny when he had the first one. I thought to myself, well, he's literally, because they were on 7-on-7, so I could tell they were obviously not going to be running the ball. And when the first one went out, I was like, well, I should probably do the tying one just to get it out there. But look, obviously the training camp stats are something we talk about a lot on this pod. I know that outside of the pod, sometimes some people love the training camp stats. Some people hate the training camp stats, but let me give like my take on this. So whatever you think of the 158 number, if you think it matters, it doesn't matter. It's important. Like, it's not about that number. It's about what we're seeing from Jalen Hurts in training camp. The tying the record thing is a fun note for how he's played. But today was another day where, I think he threw the ball 16 times, and I don't think there was a single throw that was put in harm's way that I can think of off the top of my head. He's just having an incredibly efficient camp. And again, like now he's up to 172 throws, no interceptions. A more telling number could be that through 10 practices last year, he had 7 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Through 10 practices this year, he has 17 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. So if you're not a numbers guy, if you don't care about, training camp stats, let's just simplify it for everybody. He looks awesome in training camp this year.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat what I said when we last spoke on Monday, when I think he's having as good as a camp that you could, have realistically hoped for. That's not to say he's looked amazing every day and perfect and, hasn't thrown a single bad pass. Again, I'm saying realistic, what you could have realistically expected from him. I don't think you could be asking for much more. I thought he had some really good passes today, specifically the one up the seam to Grant Calcaterra.
Yep.
Really love the anticipation, the accuracy on that throw to fit it in between the linebacker and the safety. The defenders looked like, to me after that play, like, well, what could we even do about that? It's just a really good throw. So I think we've seen that throughout training camp, Jalen Hurts. And one thing that's really stood out to me in years past that I've always harped on is the amount of times, and we've probably talked about it on here, that Jalen Hurts runs the ball in 7-on-7, which is just pointless because that's just a waste of a rep. Like, throw the ball. There's no point of running. Usually, and they run because they're not making a quick decision. They're holding it forever, and he just takes off. He's really avoided doing that, especially in recent practices at all, which I think has been great to see and speaks to the decision making. There's also another rep today I loved here where I saw him go through his progressions and just hit Devontae in the flat for a quick check down. But I could see him like looking at different parts of the field and then boom, check it down, quick decision. So I really think, this is an encouraging, there it is, camp for him in a big way. And my question for you is that, and we're not done with camp yet. There's still time to go. Do you think this is better than the 2017 Carson Wentz training camp?
So I've thought about this quite a bit, and I don't know if people are ready for another training camp number, but the next number Hurts could try to pass is the 31 touchdowns by Carson in 2017. I'll take a week before I bring that one to people. I don't know if they're ready, but it's a great question. So my gut instinct is no. Like, as good as he has been, and he's been awesome, I mean, Carson in 2017 was putting the ball all over the field. Like, Jalen, I think his calling card of camp so far is efficiency. And 17 touchdowns is nothing to like sneeze at. Like, he is definitely moving the ball and been really impressive. I just think Carson in 2017 had more of a wow factor than Jalen has. I mean, I know this term can sometimes be a negative. Like, Carson to me in 2017 looked like Josh Allen. Jalen, to me, in this camp, is more of like a game manager, Tom Brady type of quarterback, where you watch practice and there's maybe 2 or 3 throws of practice where you go, wow, that was a really nice throw. And then you end practice and you look and he goes, wow, he was 18 of 21 for 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. So I don't think he's past Carson of 2017 yet in my head or my heart, to be honest. Like, that's my camp, but he's been awesome. I mean, where would you fall on it?
Yeah, I would say not quite yet. I think you're hitting on the key point of there was more flash with Wentz, but I think he could get there. Like if he finishes camp strong, I think it will be. And at the very least, I think it's second. I think it's right behind that. So just to contextualize like how good of a camp he's having, I think he's like, yeah, this is the second best training camp I've ever seen by a Eagles quarterback that I can really remember, dating back to when I first started covering him in 2013.
Like Vic Foles, I think, was, our first kind of training camp. That's what prompted the tracking of the stats. I mean, the other thing is too, Carson, I think when I think of 2017 Carson and the training camp, I think of him lighting the Dolphins up. Jalen hasn't had that opportunity yet, and he won't have the 2 practices that Carson did. Carson got 2 practices against Miami. Jalen only gets the 1 against the Patriots. But you're right. Like if Jalen goes to New England next week and lights them up and has like five or 6 touchdowns, because they'll probably do a lot of red zone. They normally do in these team drills. And if he moves to, 24 touchdowns, no interceptions, and they dust the Patriots, and Sirianni and Jalen move to 9-2 and joint practices, like it'll get ready for that one next week. You're right. He could, again, like I think Carson 2017 almost has a bit of like the Michael Jordan, like you're chasing a ghost a little bit, right? Like LeBron's a better player, I think, than Michael Jordan, but he's chasing a ghost. Well, we don't have to
on that.
We'll save that for clap your hands with Jack Fritz. But no, I mean, to your overall point though, absolutely the second best training camp I've seen. There's been times I've tried to talk myself into it, like, oh, this has been really good, but this is, I think, without question, the second best camp, and he certainly is right there with Carson. There were 2 throws I wanted to point out that you didn't. One, I thought his touchdown to Dallas Goedert was a really nice throw. And what I really liked about it was probably from about 15 yards out. He didn't really have pressure, but Goedert was over the middle of the field, like in almost a bubble, like in front of one defender, but behind another. And Jalen just lofted it. Like it wasn't, he didn't like sling it. It wasn't a lot on there. He lofted it over the fingertips of a defender. I forget who it was, and perfectly hit Goedert in stride. I thought that was an awesome throw. What was it, Nakobe? Okay. All right. Well, there we go. Nakobe in coverage yet again. And we'll get to that in a second because we talked about that on the sideline a little bit today. But the other throw that I thought really stood out was another throw where he's been doing a good job getting the ball out quick over the middle. Like there was a throw to Devontae Smith today. It was a situational drill where Sirianni yelled out what was going on. I believe it was 3rd and 5, and the ball came out quick and it got right to Devontae for the first down. He picked up a little bit of yak, and it was just like a super efficient play. And that's what I'm talking about, where it wasn't a 25-yard between 3 defenders pass like Carson had in 2017, but that's like an A+ down. It's 3rd and 5, big pressure situation. Like everyone's into it. I thought those 2 throws also really kind of encapsulated what he's been.
The quick pass you're referring to there, that's what everyone is clamoring for when it comes to like hot routes. Like that's what people want to see is like, oh, how do you beat the blitz? Okay, let Jalen Hurts just rifle it to AJ or Devontae, and instead of it's a huge sack or whatever, Jalen Hurts takes off and throws it away out of bounds. Oh, it's a first down. It's a 5-yard gain. It's a 7-yard gain. Boom, next play. So yeah, I think that's been encouraging to see.
Well, if you remember too, and this will maybe be a segue into the other big news of the day, not ESPN made a little news today, but remember last year before the playoff game against the Buccaneers, an article came out, and I believe it was actually on ESPN as well, and I believe it was Tim McManus again, basically stating like Jalen wasn't happy with the offense, and in that they talked about like throws over the middle specifically. Now, I personally disagreed with that a little. If you looked at the attempts over the middle in 2023 to 2022, they're actually comparable. I think it was right around the same. It's just the production is not the same. But regardless, clearly last year, Jalen felt the ball wasn't going over the middle enough. Now you could point to him and go, we'll throw it over the middle. But regardless, like they're throwing it over the middle more in camp for sure. There are just more slants, more, like I said, the Goedert throw was over the middle. He had a touchdown to Devontae that was over the middle up to 2 or 3 days ago in camp. So the ball is definitely going over the middle. And I think there's been far fewer down the field, like 40-yard down the sideline throws than there have been in the past.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And I think part of that plays into or goes hand in hand with the rid of the ball quick and not just drifting out of the pocket and then chucking it downfield as much as he's just
Mhm.
making a quick decision right away, middle of the field, boom. And that's again, so we've seen that since day one. We've been talking about efficiency a lot. That's just been so present. Quick decision making, efficiency. Other than that, like one little stretch there where I said I give him like thumbs down, thumbs sideways one day where it wasn't even entirely on him. The protection wasn't really good those
Mhm.
days. I thought he made it worse at times by holding on to it a little too long. But other than those days where the defensive line really just like dominated, he's been, I think, he's gotten the better of the defense with his mind.
So you remember how the end of last pod, you had a Saquon take that you were not like, weren't strong on, but just something you were feeling. I'm going to throw one by you and tell me if you think there's logic to this. So Jalen Hurts talked today about the protection and the responsibilities with the blitz pickup and how he enjoys doing it and how in the past before the NFL, he's had more control at the line of scrimmage than he has with the Eagles since coming here. So I think that he's looked awesome, like so far, getting rid of the ball quickly. I think while it's hard to tell completely when they're blitzing because they can't tackle, I feel like he has been good against the blitz this year. A lot of the times, or in training camp, I should say, a lot of the times he's had to run, I feel, is because like protection breakdown from players losing one-on-one battles, not so much a blitz coming at him not seeing it. Do you think last year Kelsey just was more of a problem than we think? Because Kelsey has talked about how he was not good. I mean, I look. I'll do all the things. Kelsey's the best. We know. I think he's the face of the
The
Eagles
framing
franchise.
is just funny, is all.
Yeah, right. But I'm saying, do you think that maybe Jason Kelsey, like the offensive line, was more to blame in this blitz thing than we think? And that if Jalen is truly going to have full control this year, and better coaching and all that, like maybe Jalen will be better at it than he was than Kelsey was last year.
I mean, I don't want to pin it all on Jason Kelsey, but I get where your point is. And I think it kind of, I mean, going back to the ESPN article of it all, part of the disconnect seemed to be referenced in there that Jalen Hurts thought he was going to have more control over the offense last
Mm-hmm.
year, specifically with the promotion of Brian Johnson and obviously connection to him. And the disconnect was that, Nick Sirianni wanted to do more of what he had been doing. And Sirianni is, on the record with those comments as well. He had that quote with Jeff McLean back in early last season
Yep.
that was like so damning in hindsight.
The
So
quote that was basically like, "We're going to keep things the same,"
yeah,
essentially. To
yeah. It was
paraphrase.
like we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and not so many words. It's like we want to get even better at what we do. We want to kind of
Yeah.
tweak what we do, but we're not going to really like reinvent ourselves at all. Which I don't
Mhm.
think is insane on its face in terms of like you did do good things, so you want to keep it going. But obviously, as we've learned from Chip Kelly, like you have to adjust. You can't literally
Yes.
do the same thing. So anyway, yeah,
The
I get
definition
what
of
you're
insanity, one might say.
people do like to bring up that quote.
They do.
I don't know if that's just Kelsey based as much as that's a factor in there. I think ultimately, I think that like it was kind of people are obviously mad about that ESPN article. Why are we bringing up last year?
Mhm.
Well, as it translates to like looking ahead, which is the point and like relevant for the future, I think there is something a bigger point you're hitting on here where like maybe Jalen Hurts' agency in this offense means a better Jalen Hurts out there on the field.
Yeah, or maybe he'll just be better at it. Like Kelsey, again, Hall of Fame player, all those things. But Kelsey is also very honest. And he did say he felt he couldn't continue into next year. And he felt he wasn't as good last year as people say. So just something to consider. It's by no means bashing Kelsey. It's more just saying maybe Hurts taking control of this offense. And I think you just phrased it perfectly. Will give a better version of Jalen. If he feels he has more control before the snap, he has better control of what he's looking at. I think we're seeing that in camp so far. So let's talk about the article because we've kind of referenced it a few times. Let's say what we thought of how Nick and Jalen responded to it before we give our thoughts on the article itself. So Tim McManus, who we can both say without question, like Tim's the best. Like I think when it comes to reporting stories like this, he is the best out there right now. Tim is amazing, good friend. Like I think highly of Tim and of the article.
Yeah, show me a time when he's ever missed, like and got
something
wrong.
Tim is
show me that. Not
Tim,
you,
Tim
but
is
anyone who would doubt him.
right, 100%. So both very high on Tim. What I did want, so Nick was asked about it, and I thought his answer, he basically was like, "Me and Jalen are a good relationship, but like all relationship things need to work on." It was like 15 seconds. It sounded scripted. My takeaway from that is I think that I think he was hurt by this article. I think he read it and was kind of like, who is talking about me? Like whether I don't want to guess who the sources were, but I think Nick was hurt. And I think not by Tim, but by the fact that people are still talking about this and blaming him and saying that, he was power hungry last year, essentially, and he wanted more control and that, he took responsibility. And I think he probably took more responsibility than he should. But my takeaway from the Nick response to the article was that he was hurt by the fact people said this about him.
Yeah, I didn't have as strong of a takeaway from the answer because just like you said, it sounded kind of scripted and not so like sincere and authentic, more of like what the PR team coached him up to say. But there was an interesting part in the article where it was something of the effect of like Nick doesn't get enough credit for some of Jalen's success. And, if you're parsing that, you're probably thinking that's probably from more, a pro Sirianni kind of source in there. So I thought that was kind of an interesting inclusion. And I'm certainly a way that probably most I don't, if any Eagles fans feel that way, like, actually we should be giving Nick more credit in that specific instance. So I thought that was an interesting inclusion. But my bigger takeaway was actually from Jalen's reaction to this, which was kind of like an interesting press conference setting because Jalen was asking reporters questions at one point, and it started, with Jalen getting asked all these questions about what was like. So it's funny because a great article, but like such an interesting anecdote of its own thing that Jalen Hurts apparently went out of his way to contact Wink Martindale shortly after the Giants beat the Eagles in week 18 to, kind of get his brain on how, the Eagles can actually be better at working against the blitzes that Martindale is creating and other blitzes, obviously, that Jalen would go on the face before the playoff game against the Bucs. But getting asked so many questions about that, Jalen was like, where's this coming from? Like, why are we talking about this right now? Apparently the PR stuff, I guess, didn't prep him on some of that part. But anyway, there's a clip going out there on social media that unfortunately like cuts it off of where Jalen is asking about like where this article came from. And Tim McManus was actually in the press conference and I thought gave a great answer of why the story is relevant overall. And like, we're looking at this as how it collapsed last year and why, and how things maybe could be different or what it looks like going forward. And really, I think the interpretation of that, and this often happens when a player, talks to the media, and fans root for the players. So of course they're going to take the player's side. I get it. But it's like, I don't think Jalen was like trying to own the media. I thought he was actually, and I think that's for a guy who I think can be like needlessly, or at least in the past has been kind of needlessly cagey and combative at times, even when questions aren't even really trying to like angle at something malicious by any means, can be pretty innocuous. I thought Jalen actually was kind of like pretty direct and forward in a more like, I don't know if respectful is the right word, but like authentic and candid and honest way, and wasn't trying to be combative, was just trying to give a good answer. And it gave me a sense of like, he just looked more relaxed up there than I've seen him in the past. And I didn't see that on guard edge and attitude. And I think that kind of speaks to a bigger picture here of how he feels in training camp. I think he's feeling more relaxed and more comfortable. Maybe some of that goes back to what we just talked about and of him being in more control and having that power. So I actually did like his answer and his really press conference demeanor as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. I think press conference wise, he's been really good this year. I think he does look like he is trying to put out a concerted effort to maybe change up some things from how he handled them last year. In terms of the back and forth with Tim, my read on it is, my guess is, I know the PR staff preps him like they do before every press conference. They probably didn't think the Wink thing was a big deal in there. And so they were like, all right, here's, da-da-da. And so when he heard the Wink stuff, I'm sure Jalen didn't read this article. He was just thrown off by it. I agree, the back and forth with Tim. I thought Jalen, I think respectful is the perfect way to put it. I think at one point even said, I know you guys have a job to do. So Jalen handled it fine. And like, that's kind of my overarching thought of the article is, I think if you would have told Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, and Jalen that an article was going to come out on Wednesday morning and it was going to be kind of like a quote unquote tell all or behind the scenes look at what happened, I think they would have thought it would have been worse than it was. I thought Tim did a really good job of fairly depicting both sides. It didn't feel like a hit piece on Jalen or a hit piece on Nick. I think it accurately depicted what happened. And now to get into more like our opinions of it, I think that what is in there is kind of what happened. Like, there was a quote in there about how all year they kind of walked around saying, oh gosh, we lost the Super Bowl. I've said repeatedly, I think when discussing the locker room stuff, we don't bring up enough the fact that we're coming off losing the Super Bowl. When you lose it, it's easy that day to say, you know what, it sucks we lost, but we'll be back. We're a great team and the offseason's great. I think when I think losing the Super Bowl sets in when next year it's clear you're not going to win the Super Bowl. And then it's like, wow, we really blew our shot at it. So I thought that was a really interesting point of the article. And I think that, to like kind of sum up what was in there, I think that, yes, there was frustration over the offense. Nick wanted to do one thing. And by the way, Nick's coming off going to the Super Bowl in his second year. Like, I understand Nick feeling like he should have control over what's happening. He was the head coach. Brian Johnson was a first-time offensive coordinator. Jalen was a young quarterback, just like Nick was a head coach, but Jalen's a young quarterback. I think Nick felt going into the season, I can run my offense because we saw last year it worked. We saw Jalen can do it. It got AJ a career year, Devontae a career year. And he made a mistake with that. And so the tension, I don't believe, is like because Jalen's really quiet and Nick's really out here. Like, I don't think that's it. I think it was a disagreement over how to fix a problem of a sinking season. And while the season was sinking, the reality of losing the Super Bowl set in, and it added tension to all of it. So I don't view this as a situation that can't be corrected or they'll never get along. And I do agree with the quote that Jalen, according to this, doesn't give Nick enough credit. Like, Jalen was not Jalen before Nick became his head coach. And it's not all Nick's responsibility and, all that. Jalen works hard and everything. But this is a marriage that works. And I think they just got in a fight last year. And now, because of the reality of the jobs they're in, it's just out of control.
Yeah, I was listening to you on WIP with Giglio and Hugh Douglas. And I think you mentioned, like, this is the kind of stuff that won't be a problem if they're winning. And I genuinely agree with that. But it is funny, though, because this happened a lot last year when they were 10-1 and they were winning. And now obviously, you covered this. Part of that was the crushing weight of expectations of the Super Bowl and also the feel. Obviously, like, that was such a unique circumstance last year where they were winning so much, but the feel, the vibes of everything were just not quite there. So usually if you're winning, the vibes are going to be higher than they were last year. So I do agree with that part. I mean, it's definitely like a dynamic that continues to bear monitoring, as you said as well, where like if things go in a rut, that begs the question because, like, look, everything's great right now. It's training camp. There's optimism. There's hope. You haven't lost a game yet. So it's the Mike Tyson quote. It's like everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. Like, okay, the Eagles, everything's great going in. But the reality is in an NFL season and most NFL seasons, you are going to get punched in the face at some point. That's adversity is inevitable. So therefore it is what is best measured is your response to it. Like, and I think the best head coaches, that's how you measure them. It's not that did they face adversity? Like that part is not a failure that you faced adversity. It's not failure just facing adversity. The failure is if you do not respond well to said adversity, and they clearly didn't last year. And I think it's fair to wonder, have they truly learned from it? It seems like there's encouraging signs from what we're seeing here, but again, that relates. Some of those quotes in there are like really damning about the one-on-one, literally saying Jalen and Nick, like, they can't almost have a one-on-one relationship without any kind of like, or they kind of really need that mediation.
A third party, I think is,
They need someone to be in that dynamic. And look, that's what they've set up with Kellen Moore being in here. I thought it stood out today. Not that it hasn't before, but like I especially noticed it today where they started off practice with kind of that walkthrough format. And it was Kellen Moore basically in the huddle, running things with the whole starters and the offense. And I don't even know where Nick Sirianni was. I didn't really see where he even was on the field. So, we're seeing
he was actually with the defense. Okay, during that whole install period. Yeah, he was with the defense.
So wasn't even involved with that. And that's the setup they're going in with. It seems to be working out so far in training camp, but it's another file away thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the image of training camp so far is them riding on Big Dom's truck, like, and listening to music. And it's such a perfect example of when everything's going great, these two can get along. Like, they have a lot in common. They both love football. Like, I just truly believe at their heart, they're similar people. But where you're right is you cannot have a functioning Super Bowl team if the quarterback and head coach can't meet one-on-one in a productive fashion. It just, because to your point, I think you phrased it really well. Meeting adversity is not a failure. The 2017 Eagles had adversity. The 2022 Eagles had adversity. They bounced back from it. Jeffrey Lurie, the word I keep thinking of when at his end of season press conference or at the owners meetings, was resiliency. Is that team wasn't resilient last year. And part of that is when people in the building sense that Nick and Jalen aren't getting along, it's hard to believe in the message that's what being said. I mean, in team meetings, they sit like 3 feet apart. Jalen sits in that front seat in the front row and Nick's right there. And if you know that those two people just like can't function, then it's going to be really hard for them to win. So you're right. I mean, if they lose to Green Bay and then, at halftime of the Falcons game, they have like 7 points, obviously Kellen will be involved in that. But yeah, it's a combustible situation, 100%. Like, I'm sure you get asked a lot, how many games you think they'll win? I'm probably going to pick 10 just because I think you have to safeguard against the idea that 4 weeks into the season, Nick and Jalen can't even be in the same room together and everything's just broken again.
I have a real quick aside that is related to this. Like, I kind of feel bad for Brian Johnson. I've been a Brian Johnson guy defending him. I'm still not convinced. He might be bad. That's possible. Yeah. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve any blame, but like, it's very clear he was not like, it wasn't simple as he's fully calling the plays and his offense sucks. It's like he's clearly in a situation, and the article covered that. And now some of that is probably some, again, pro Brian Johnson sourcing in there just by the nature of the quote. But anyway, it's just it's a very bummer for him.
For sure. And I mean, just to continue that aside, Brian Johnson, it was his first year. Like, we don't think about that enough. How many people in their first year on the job are right away excellent at what they do? Like, Jalen wasn't in 2022. 2021. Nick wasn't in 2021. They didn't have a successful year, but it is funny that we talk about Brian. They were 7th in the league in points last year. And you would think I know the end of the season was very different, but you would think they finished 25th or 26th the way the offense is discussed as a complete like shit show, which it really wasn't. All right. Any other thoughts on the article? I'm trying to think of what else was in there. The one-on-one meeting, Jalen not getting enough credit. I mean, the Nick Sirianni accountability stuff in the meeting to me doesn't really strike me. Like, he says that all the time at the podium. But any other thoughts on the article?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it.
All right. So outside of the historic day, and you have to wonder if they're getting along better because they know Jalen is out there setting records. But outside of the Jalen Hurts thing, I did have
one more Jalen Hurts thing. Sorry, you didn't ask him the question. How did you not ask him the question?
I know. I punked out. Well, so here's what in the dugout baseball, as me and James jokingly call it. So at practice, me and you were talking about it, and you were like, you got to ask him about the record. And I was like, all right, like I wasn't thinking of it, but whatever. And so I'm in the press conference. I didn't get a good seat. When you're stuck in the back, I'm just like, it's way more nerve-wracking to ask a question. You're yelling in front of everyone. But also, once like the things shift to the ESPN article, it felt almost a little silly. But yes, you're right. I copped out. I should have asked him. 100%.
Next time you see him, you should ask him.
Yeah, I mean, if the moment has passed, but yes, I will maybe ask him.
The streak might be going still by that point.
You're right. He's at 172 right now. Okay, so, but yes, that is fair. Like, holding me accountable.
Accountability. We're big on accountability here. I know
Jeff. We are. Yes, the Go Birds pod and WIP. Absolutely. Okay. Outside of Jalen, what was your other, big takeaway or things you observed in practice?
That's a great question. I'm looking at my notes here because
so I have something if you want to look for a second.
Yeah. You go first.
Like, Mekhi Becton's the starting guard. This is now Zach Bond level of it's obvious what's going on here. Mekhi Becton took the first team reps today at guard. Tyler Steen took second team reps. I didn't see if he shuffled in there at all, but Becton at the beginning of all the drills was the starter. Nick was asked about it in the press conference, and I thought his answer was very clear, textbook. Yes, you're correct, but I'm not going to say it. Like, he did the whole, hey, we have time, we're not going to say anything, blah, blah, blah. Like, bro, come on. We see it. Like, Becton's going to be the starting right guard. So I view that competition as pretty much over. Barring injury or Becton, like, playing god-awful for a week, I think Becton is going to be the starting right guard week 1.
Yeah, I don't think he's really, like, earned it from a standpoint of, like, he's just been so dominant that he has to be starting. But I think it's clearly the trajectory of what's happening right now. So I do think, it's looking likely considering he's taking. And it was weird because on Tuesday, it was Steen, who was still limited on the injury report, splitting some of those first team reps, but Becton was up first. Then today, if I'm not mistaken, I thought it was only Becton. Even though
I think it was too, but I always like to save myself because there's definitely possible I missed that he went in there for a rep or two.
There's the qualifier that, there's so many things to look at. I'm naturally going to miss things. But I did not notice Steen with the first team, unlike I did on Tuesday. So that'll be interesting. Why don't we kind of just touch on like the big position battles here? Because that's where kind of my notes.
I have one quick like hypothetical Becton question for you. So I was talking to another reporter about this today. and I think it's an interesting hypothetical. If you remember the year Mailata won the left tackle job, they signed him prior to the start of the season.
Yes.
Would you pay Becton prior to the start of the season if you were the Eagles? If he's going to be the guy, like he's week 1 Brazil, he is starting at guard, and that is your plan. Would you pay him now? Because remember, he's on a 1-year deal, so he's a free agent after this year. Would you take that gamble?
I would want to see a little bit more in preseason training camp before I can say that definitively. I need to see like a little bit more. I don't think he should. I would. So if I'm based on right now, no, I would not do it right now. But if he looks good over the rest of training camp, can stay healthy, which has been an issue for him in the past, assuming he can avoid all that, yeah, I would consider it because you could potentially lock him in to a really favorable deal. But from the Eagles end, yes, to answer your question, from Mekhi Becton's end, I just don't see why you would want to do that. I think you would bet on yourself, and because free agent offensive linemen get paid big time,
guards now especially.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, Robert Hunt over here getting this insane contract from the Panthers. I think Becton has no reason to do it.
I think the Becton rationale would be, I've never played guard in the NFL, and if they're willing to cut me $30 million guaranteed, then I'll take it. But that's something to look out for. If Becton wins the job, it would be very Howie-like to bring it up. So,
sure.
All right. So I think we're both in the camp of Becton winning the right guard spot. Linebacker, I feel like a broken record at this point, but I mean, I just think it's Zach Bond. I think where we disagree though is I do think Nakobe's having a good camp, and you don't. So what are you seeing from Nakobe?
Well, again, I think he's had a good camp relative to my zero expectations for him. And he, as I've said before, can defend the run a bit, can do some good things as a blitzer, but just is not an option in cover. He's just not a legitimate coverage option. Like he almost just like can't do it at all, which is like a big problem. And it's like, as we were talking about with our good friend Jimmy Kempski on the sideline, like, and Jimmy, to betray his confidence here and say what he said, I guess to us, he was just like, I basically, in not so many words, just having a hard time seeing how he's even going to be trusted to get snaps at all if he just can't cover. I will say I want to throw in where I think it's obvious that Zach Bond and Devin White are the starters, 10th day in a row where they were the first guys up in the first team defense at linebacker. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. kind of making like a little he's interesting to monitor. He had a really good rep today where there was a play action pass, but Tanner McKee throws it to Tyrion Davis Price, was in the goal to goal line or goal to go situation. And Jeremiah Trotter Jr. doesn't bite on the fake, runs over, and they're not live tackling, weren't even wearing pads, but gets in position to tackle him. And Zach Bond ran up to him after that play and said, like, good eyes. Like, he clearly saw, and that's like, I feel like a big thing for a rookie is not just like the actual playmaking ability and all that, like physically, but the mindset, the mental part of the game for him to do that, I thought was really impressive. And just in general, Trotter's gotten some run with the first team. I don't think he is going to be like week 1 starter, but I think he might not be far off if Bond slips or whatever, or like they don't trust Nakobe.
I agree with you. I think we're all rooting for Jeremiah Trotter Jr. His dad was at practice today. It would be awesome to see. But even if you remove the name, I think they found something in this player. Like, so going into training camp, I thought he was going to be Nakobe 2.0 based off scouting reports and like the limited highlights I've seen. Just in person, he is far more athletic than Nakobe. And your point about what Zach Bond said, I think is correct and important, but also for a different reason than what you said. It's right. It is because he saw it, and that's huge for a rookie, but he got there. Like, I think Nakobe knows what he's looking at. I don't think the issue with Nakobe is he's confused. Like the throw to Goddard, like Nakobe was in the right place. He's just not tall enough to get his arm up. The pass he led up to Gainwell, he was with Gainwell down that sideline. He was just a step behind because he's not athletic enough. I think Trotter, outside of having a high football IQ, is just a better athlete than Nakobe. So I think Trotter is kind of what everyone thought Nakobe would be. Like this compact, like true middle linebacker, super smart, he wins with his kind of reps before the snap. And I think that's something the Eagles really liked about him when they watched him in the draft. They saw a lot of instances where he saw what was going to happen and he was able to then go make the play. I just don't think Nakobe can athletically make the play consistent enough in the NFL. So I don't think Nakobe's having a bad camp. And you're right. I shouldn't have said you thought he was having a bad camp. I think Nakobe's actually having the best camp he's had with the Eagles, but he's just not a top 3 linebacker. Like, I think Trotter's better. I think Devin White's definitely better. And I think Zach Bond is a better athlete and is playing better. So This is why I've been reluctant to move Nakobe off the bubble. I think Nakobe will make the team, but is there a world where cut down day they just trade Nakobe for like a fifth? I don't know. I think they'd be open to it.
It's possible. Yeah, and also the Nakobe Jeremiah Trotter Jr. comparison here. Like, I mean, you just said it. Like, you think Nakobe's having the best camp in part because the bar was incredibly low, and he was, 100%. I think, pretty much invisible almost the first 2 years. And last year he missed a stretch there where he was injured too. Trotter Jr., I think, like, for him to look this good this early is magic buzzword encouraging.
Yeah, definitely 100%. And that's, again, like when I'm saying Nakobe's having the best camp, it's because he stayed healthy and he's made like 3 plays. It's not like every day he's out there doing something. So yeah, I think we agree it's going to be Devin White, Zach Bond. The Trotter Nakobe thing is interesting. I'll definitely keep an eye out on that more. I think it's a good point by you. The other competition, cornerback 2, kind of, it's interesting. I almost like it's the least talked about position battle, even though going into camp, it was the most anticipated. I kind of think there's a clear-cut winner there too, but where are you at with it?
Yeah, it's the 7th day today of Isaiah Rodgers at cornerback first team across from Darius Slay. I think it's like 6 in a row. There's a point on day 4 we had Keeley 3, Isaiah Rodgers 1, and ever since then, and I think Rodgers had that really impressive pass breakup in the end zone right around there.
Yeah, it was like a one-on-one, I think.
Ever since then, it's clearly swung to Isaiah Rodgers, who I don't think has like lit it up the same way he did in the spring, certainly, but I still think has had good reps. There have been times where I've noticed him specifically get beat by being like too aggressive and like getting kind of bitten with like by a pump fake or something like that. So I've noticed back in the spring, like, to compliment to him, he looks great breaking on the ball. And when he does, make that decision, he can really get there, and that can result in a pick 6 like he did against Jalen Hurts back then. Could also burn him. I think you kind of live with that ultimately, especially with the way he moves. I trust his movement. He looks so athletic. He's so fast and a fluid mover. So I agree. I think it's going to be Rodgers. And then, but although the unexpected sort of development is that Quinyon Mitchell, I think, is also going to be their slot guy because, Cooper DeJean has not practiced yet, might not be able to until a week or so. We don't know. And then Avonte Maddox, I don't think he really had a great camp last year, has obviously struggled to stay healthy. And I think you want to get Quinyon Mitchell on the field. So I think Quinyon's going to be their slot guy.
And for what's worth, Maddox could be their starting safety week 1. Like, Chauncey has a shoulder injury. I think he plays week 1, but I think they've moved to making Maddox more comfortable as a safety than they are predominant as a nickel, because they need backups there regardless. Like, Reed is a nice player. Chauncey hasn't really played the position a ton and gets hurt. So I think having a quality backup there that gets, a month straight of snaps and reps there is important. I agree with you on Isaiah Rodgers. I don't think that Rodgers is like severely outplaying Keely Ringo, and I don't think Keely Ringo has been bad. Keely Ringo really struggles to cover Johnny Wilson. It feels like he's let up a lot of passes to him. But to your point about the corners in general, I think Jalen's been so good that it's not like these guys are getting beat down the field left and right. It's just almost impossible to cover AJ or Devontae within like 10 yards. Like, they're so good off the line and they're so good at creating separation that none of these guys are like breaking up pass after pass or obviously having an interception. But I agree with you. The only like interesting dynamic here is if, let's say, they're in the meetings, and I don't think this is the case because I think they feel Isaiah Rodgers is better, but let's say it's close. Do you think the fact that Rodgers is on a 1-year deal would matter here? And while they have Keely for another, I guess, 2 years because he was a late round pick, and then, or no, before. So they have him for 3 more years after this. Do you think that would factor in at all?
I think if it was like, dead even, they just can't decide, maybe. Ringo's also younger than Quinyon Mitchell. Like, maybe you're just kind of, hoping that, okay, even if he's like, maybe it's like 51-49 in favor of Rodgers, but you're like, yeah, but like, Ringo could be something more just because he is younger and has that potential. I would like understand that. But I think ultimately that's kind of more like a front office view and not the Vic Fangio view, where Vic Fangio is probably like, if it's a dead tie, maybe I'm just going to lean with the guy who's actually played in the NFL a lot more before.
And honestly, much like back then, they could pay Rodgers. Like, if I'm Rodgers, I would be very open to this. You were suspended a full year. You've kind of gotten your 1 strike against you. If they're willing to give you, I can't think of a number off the top of my head, but let's say $15 million guaranteed, and you get a 3-year deal, which is probably less than he would be worth. But the point is, I think you could get him at a discounted rate. Back then, I'm not so sure you could. I think Rodgers you could get at a discounted rate.
I don't think they would, just because of the youth, though. Like, I think with Cooper and Quinyon and Keely, I just don't think they want to even commit.
Well, but your three corners moving forward could be Quinion on the outside, Rodgers on the outside, and then you have Cooper as nickel, and then you put Keeley somewhere. I agree with you, but like those could be their three guys for sure. Like Keeley, they like Keeley, and he's a nice player, and they moved up to get him. He's not a first, second, or third round pick, so I don't know how much kind of stock he has in terms of winning a job.
They did trade a third to get him, so he's not literally a third round pick, but they spent a third round pick to get him. Yeah,
good point. All right, so we did right guard, linebacker, corner, wide receiver 3. Last one you can think of for the.
Yeah, I've real quick on tight end too. That's not really much of a discussion, but Grant Calcaterra I thought has had a pretty good training camp and has seemed to kind of step up for that role.
I 100% agree with you. Me and I think you were actually by me when me and Kemsky were debating this. Like, I think Calcaterra's had an awesome camp. Or no, I think it was someone else I was debating this with. But I think Calcaterra has been like stock up way better than expected. He catches almost everything thrown his way. He's getting a lot of the first team reps. He's clearly in like the group of playmakers where when they're split, it's like AJ, Devontae, Dallas, Saquon, and like Calcaterra's over there, and the other guys are on the other side. So I agree. I think he's won the tight end 2 spot. Do you think they'll keep CJ Uzomah, or do you think they'll keep Alberto?
I think they might keep CJ. Like Alberto, the problem with him, he might be like a better player or a better pass catcher than CJ, but like it's just he doesn't play special teams. Like look at his career. Like you need the backup tight ends to play special teams, and also probably run block. And I don't think the book on Albert O is he's like a good run blocker either. So I just don't really like see the fit there. So I think Albert O in theory might be a better player than CJ, but CJ like fits more of what they actually will use from that third tight end, just like a run blocker who also play in special teams. But yeah, agree in Calcaterra. Back to receiver. Johnny Wilson taking more first team reps, taking the first team reps when they were doing that walkthrough period earlier in practice.
Yeah.
He had a drop today. I thought Zach Braun, was it Zach Braun? Someone helped kind of break that up.
Yeah, I wouldn't qualify that as a drop. Like he maybe should have caught it, but I thought the defender made a nice play on the ball.
Okay, fair. But I think, that's, and we're certainly going to, the preseason games are going to be huge for him. That is like, these are one of the players who has most to gain, I would say, or lose over these preseason games in terms of being able to solidify himself. Britton Covey, though, your boy, which I was talking to Jimmy about this after you had walked away. It's very funny because last year at this time, you were like, why do they even need to keep Britton Covey on the roster? Because at the time, he hadn't really done anything so much on offense and was just the punt returner. But now has clearly established himself as, I think, arguably the best punt returner in the NFL. And then he has shown that he can contribute on offense. And today was like a case in point where he made a really tough contested catch downfield on a Kenny Pickett throw, where he was getting like hit as I think it was by Tristan McCollum or Maddox.
It was Maddox, I think.
Okay. Yeah, back there. And that's like a tough, and again, they weren't wearing pads, but that's a tough play to make for him to not only be able to make that catch, but hold on as he's getting contacted. So really good stuff from Britton Covey as well.
Dude, I think I'm at a point with Covey where I'll believe he can't do it when I see it. Like I used to be, I'll believe it when I see it. All he does in camp is make nice catches. He catches everything on his way. The catch he made today was a legitimately impressive catch. He got high up. Like he got pretty high up in there. Maddox, again, there's no pad, so he doesn't hit him, but it was the closest thing to a hit I've seen in like a non-padded practice. I think he's really good. So looking at that third receiver spot, I view it as if they trade for a guy, it's more of an AJ Devontae backup than it is coming in to be the third guy. I think they are right now cautiously optimistic that they can get by with Paris Campbell, Britton Covey, and Johnny Wilson as the 3, as long as AJ, Devontae, and Dallas are healthy. If you lose one of them for a long stretch, then that's tough because you're asking one of those 3 players to do something they're probably not ready for. But I think like as currently constructed, if I had to say who's winning it, I'd probably say Johnny Wilson is winning it and Covey is like making more noise than expected. John Ross probably hasn't had a great camp now that we're 10 days in. I mean, he had the one play where he should have had a touchdown, but Hurts missed him. But outside of that, he could be the one that's cut, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it could be him or Campbell, maybe both, depending on how, again, if they trade or add anyone at some point. I think I agree with your assessment. Like, as it currently is constituted, I think they can get by with what they have, but I don't think anything has been like written in stone. I think Johnny Wilson and Britton Covey, what they have done currently is earn the right to go through these preseason games and like see if it is good enough or they continue to play well. And then like Eagles go into the season like, okay, we're feeling good about this, as opposed to like hey, we need to make a move before week 1, which I kind of felt like that was the tone going into training camp, and Howie Roseman even answering that question about the third wide receiver position on day 1 being like, this is something we're constantly looking at every day. I think things have like cooled down a little bit on the trade addition front, but that could heat up if either Covey or Wilson continue to, if they start struggling.
Well, and the other part of it is if Jalen's going to play this well, then you can get by with one of those as a third receiver because he's making smart decisions. He's putting them in good positions to make catches. The issue would be if Jalen's really struggling and then you lose like an AJ Devontae, then you really need that guy that can like get open on his own, make plays after the catch and that type of thing. So, but no, I mean, I think besides right guard, we leave all these competitions feeling like guys have outperformed. I don't think, before camp, I'll tell you went through all these positions and 3 or 4 of them were like, yeah, these guys are doing well. That's a major win for the Eagles. The issue is the most important one is probably the one where the struggles have been the most at right guard. So, anything else from practice or any other thoughts or observations you have before we get out of here?
No, I think that's it. If you really want some deep cut stuff, you can go to my Twitter and see the Eagles first team kickoff coverage with the blockers on that unit. A little like down the depth chart stuff that I think is interesting of like, who's on there. It's like some roster bubble guys. It's some guys who are definitely on, some guys who like might be on. Kind of, I think, interesting to look at that and how that could be a factor, especially if those guys.
Well, I love that you brought that up because I think like the sign of a true veteran training camp trying to win the 53-man roster thing is who is taking special team reps in practice because it shows you who those like guys that are, 37 through 43 on game day or 47 through 53 on the roster are. So I'm definitely going to go check that out. As always, everybody should always be reading Bleeding Green Nation for all of BLG stuff and all of the excellent staff there that does good work. So that's all you got. We'll wrap this bad boy up. Thank you once again for coming on. We will have more pods throughout the week. We have a training camp game on Friday. We have Go Birds Radio on Saturday. Obviously, BLG, always welcome to join if you would like. But we will talk to you guys later in the week. Brandon, thanks for coming on. And as James says, he's Eliot, I'm James. Talk to you guys later.